Ladies and gentlemen, I have in my hand today's top 10 list compiled from a variety of David Letterman shows. Today's top 10 list, the category is 10 top things David Letterman does not want his mother to say to him on Mother's Day. That's the category, the top 10 things David Letterman does not want his mother to tell him on Mother's Day. Number 10, that's okay, David, that you didn't send me flowers for Mother's Day. I just stole some of my neighbor's flowers and pretended they were from you. Number 9, whatever you get me for Mother's Day goes straight to eBay. Number 8, I don't have a favorite child, David, but I do have a least favorite. Number 7, could you make my Mother's Day gift out to cash? Number 6, get off my property or I'll call the cops. Number 5, I pay a neighbor boy to pretend he's my son, and we go to IHOP and I get 10% off. Number 4, funny, I always had you pegged for prison. Number 3, you were so much cuter when we dressed you as a girl. Number 2, I'm not angry at the way you turned out, just disappointed. And number 1, that David Letterman doesn't want his mother to say to him on Mother's Day, why can't you have a show at 10 at night? That's the list from David Letterman. Today we are beginning another list. It's the list of trying to be as practical as we can, looking to the Bible on how-tos, a list of how-tos. Today, how to say the right word. In coming weeks, how to make the most of little, how to deal with loss, how to get a full night's sleep. That's on Father's Day. And we have some others that are also coming up as well. Trying to be as practical as we can. So let me read to you on how to say the right word. This one verse from Proverbs that I find is so instructive. Proverbs, the 25th verse, verse 11, and we'll look at a few other Proverbs this morning as well. Proverbs 25:11 says, a word aptly spoken, or a word fitly spoken, is like apples of gold in settings of silver. How wonderful it is to say the right word at the right time. Now, let me just say off the bat, we're not talking about what is the right word to say, because there are thousands of situations and conversations, and we can't find one word to fit them all. Instead, our focus is narrower this morning. It's on how to say the right word. How to say the right word. And Proverbs lifts up, this book of general wisdom, lifts up how important it is to say the right word. Proverbs 15 verse 23 says, a person finds joy in giving a fitting reply, and how good is a timely word. Isn't that wonderful? So let's find out what Proverbs has to tell us about how to say the right word. But before we begin, someone will say, wait a minute, what do you mean we have to figure out how to say the right word? Shouldn't we just say what's on our mind? Is it important to be honest and open to those that we want to speak words to? Shouldn't we get off our chest what needs to be said rather than trying to figure out how to say it? There's some truth to that. You know, we can get so concerned in trying to figure out how to say what we want to say to someone that we miss the opportunity. But here is where the weight of Proverbs, its wisdom, begins to come into play. Proverbs 9, verse 7 and 8 says, whoever corrects a mocker invites insult, and whoever rebukes a wicked person incurs abuse. Do not rebuke a mocker, or he will hate you. Rebuke a wise person, and he will love you. Instruct a wise person, and he will be wiser still. Proverbs, you see, wisely understands human nature. The Bible understands that sometimes we are open to receive advice, words from those around us. We have come to understand that God can use any person, can I repeat that word? Any person to teach us, to grow us, to correct us, to train us in the ways of God. And if it's important for us, I hope it is, to try and become and seek after God to become more and more the person God wants us to be, one of the great ways that God uses to help us grow into Christ are those around us. Their words to us, whether we know them or not. Their words of encouragement, correction, even criticism. And Proverbs says that the person who is willing to be open to what people would say, certainly sifting, of course, what they say, but the person who is willing to be open to anyone and to what that person says, to consider what that person says before God, to see where the truth is in those words, that person is called wise. Doesn't necessarily have to have knowledge, but is wise because that person understands that God could be using the words of the other to help them. But Proverbs also knows there are times when you and I are not so wise, when we close off. We're not willing to hear what others have to tell us. Perhaps you remember in your life when you rolled your eyes at your parents. See, that's not wise, according to Proverbs. In fact, Proverbs says that person is called, are you ready for this? A fool. And we all are fools sometimes. Doesn't make any difference what the age is. We don't want to hear from someone. Our pride gets in the way. We become defensive. We have an exaggerated opinion of ourselves. We don't think we need any help. And so we close ourselves off to what God might be trying to communicate to us through others. So, if it's true of us, how true it is of those around us. When we feel like we want to say something to someone in a way that will be helpful, that will encourage them, or that will correct them, we ought to pay attention to how we say what we're going to say so that they might be more open to receiving what we want to tell them. And if we come with an idea through prayer that God even might want to use us to say something to someone, how important it is to try and figure out how can I say this in such a way that the person will be more likely to listen to the words and to receive them. So, what does Proverbs tell us in terms of what we should say, and how we should say what we are going to say? Well, this first one may surprise you. Are you ready for this one? When it comes to helping people receive our advice and how we should say it, one way is to say nothing. Surprised? Proverbs 17:28, a wonderful proverb. 17:28 says, "Even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent." Isn't that great? Even a fool is thought wise if he keeps silent. But there's wisdom in that. There are times when it's important to remain silent rather than to try to give advice, rather than to try to correct, rather than to criticize, all in the name of encouraging. We want to be helpful, but sometimes saying nothing is the best course, the godly course as well. I think of our children growing up, Lucy's and my children growing up, and as they got, particularly in the teenage years, they began to think all kinds of things they might want to do, or possibilities. All kinds of them. Some of them I'll just tell you. There was the idea of buying a used school bus. There was the idea of flying by him or herself underage to a Central American country by him or herself. There was the idea of going on the senior spring break trip without parents on a cruise ship. There was the idea of buying a car stereo system and putting not one but two subwoofers in the trunk. There was the idea of going to Haiti 2 months after the earthquake. There was the idea of dating or going out with someone who was not on Lucy's or mine top 10 list. There was the idea of taking the bench seats out of our old minivan and replacing them with regular lounge chairs with seat belts. There was a whole raft of ideas, some of which came true and some of which did not. I will not tell you which ones came true and which ones did not. Some of which we had to pray about, some of which we had to pray strongly against. But we gave them the space as best we could to think, to dream without cutting off, without criticizing, without trying to direct their ideas. Sometimes the best course is to say nothing. It's not just for kids, it's for adults too. Someone comes into the break room or a coworker approaches you and begins to complain about someone else with whom you work and is frustrated with them, and they just kind of spew forth. That's not the time to pour oil on that fire. That's not the time to agree with them or to criticize them or try to steer them. Perhaps the best way of doing at that point is to remain silent, to give them the opportunity and the space to vent, to let their frustrations out, and then to be ready to re-engage the coworker. There are times when it is wise to say little. But I don't want to leave you with just that advice from the book of Proverbs. Let me try another way that also is, you might not think of, that might be a little uncharacteristic when we think of how to say the right word. Let me explain it this way. The book of Proverbs is written in a certain form. Each verse, almost all of Proverbs, is written with a verse that follows verse. The first part of the verse makes a statement. The second part of the verse has to do with that first statement. It either continues the idea or talks about the opposite idea. So I thought this morning we'd test the accuracy of that statement. I'd like someone down here on the sanctuary floor to yell out a number from 1 to 31. 7. That's going to be Proverbs, the 7th chapter. Now it's time to involve the balcony people. Yes, the silent balcony people. Someone yell out a number between 1 and 20. 19. So let's see if there's a Proverbs 7, verse 19, and see if that form of that verse is the same as what I am saying. Proverbs 7, 19. There is a Proverbs 7, 19. Yeah, well, let's try another verse. I'm just kidding. This is going to be actually verses 19 and 20. My husband is not at home. He is gone on a long journey. It's the first part. He took his purse filled with money and will not be home till full moon. The first part is a statement, husband not home. The second part furthers that same statement and gives some more explanation. Let's just, I don't think I've convinced you. Let's try one more. Let's go up balcony first time. Number 1 to 31. 3, okay, and verse down here? 7. We like 7. Okay, let's see what 3:7 has to do with. Please, Lord, please. Okay, great. Proverbs 3:7, thank you. Do not be wise in your own eyes, and then the restatement, fear the Lord and shun evil, which is a restatement of what it means, do not be wise in your own eyes, but fear the Lord and shun evil. So my point here is that Proverbs is written according to a proverbial form. We read the first part, which sets us up to be ready to receive the second part because we know it's coming. The form can matter. Jesus used the same idea. He taught, the Bible says, according to a certain form. Most of what he said, it seems according to the Bible, was not him just getting up there and speaking or talking. He couched his teaching in a certain form. Anybody know? Parables or stories. In fact, in one gospel it says he